Hello everyone, this is Rifa and welcome to my new video. In this video we are going to talk about gouache. Gouache commonly comes in tubes, but Himimiya also launched gouache in jelly cups, which is very easy to use. It is best to use freshly out of tubes as they are super creamy and workable when used fresh. So the creamy consistency makes gouache a unique medium. When reactivated on a palette, it takes a bit more time to rewet and it's not the same creamy velvety consistency. Gouache is a water media, commonly known as opaque watercolor. You can use water to thin down the paint, so it can be used thin and transparently just as watercolors, or you can also use it as thick and opaquely if less water is added. So it's about learning the consistency of gouache. I commonly use Himimiya gouache tubes and jelly gouache sets. I've been using them for more than a year and I love them. So typically gouache work from thin to thick, which means you can start with a very diluted wash of paint and then gradually build up the opacity by adding less water. So because of this opaque nature of gouache, you can work from both light to dark or dark to light. It's up to your preference and it's up to the type of the painting you are doing. So you don't have to preserve the white color of paper like we do in the watercolors because you can paint them opaquely at the end. So yeah, this property of gouache make it a more forgiving medium as you can cover your mistakes to an extent. Like watercolors, gouache is resoluble. You can reactivate the dried paint using water. You can use a wet brush to reactivate the dried paint on the paper or a palette. So it is very easy to clean up the palette after a painting session. You can leave your workspace as it is and come back next day to continue where you have left just by reactivating the paints. Other properties of gouache are it dries into a matte velvet finish. This property of gouache makes the photograph of gouache paintings look more beautiful as there is no reflection on the surface. And another property is that each color dries into a different value. So light colors tends to dry darker and dark colors tends to dry lighter. So it is trickier for beginners, but it can be overcome with a little practice. So you have to keep this property in your mind while mixing the paints and also while choosing the colors for your paintings because once it's dried it becomes a different color, not just a different color, it just dries into a different value. The value of the color changes once it's dried. So gouache is also described as a hybrid between watercolors and acrylic paints, but it is unique in its own way. Its main difference from watercolor is that even though it can be used as thin washes, it is designed to be opaque. Talking about the paper, there are papers exclusively for gouache, but a watercolor paper also works well as it can withstand multiple layers of paint. I usually use watercolor papers with more than 250 GSM. The texture of the paper is up to personal preference. I like cold pressed paper with medium texture so that it can get some interesting textures as I paint into the toothier part of the paper. For brushes, you can use watercolor or mixed media brushes. I usually use synthetic brushes. These are from Himimiya. They have long bristles and can hold a lot of water and paint, so the paint can go a very long way. A flat brush is perfect for blocking in backgrounds and blending. With a round brush that comes with a thin tip, you can get very thin, precise lines, and with a bit more control and pressure, you can achieve wide strokes as well. For even thinner lines, a small round brush or liner brush is great as the paint can easily flow off the long bristles. With a fan brush, you can paint some nice grass textures. This could save a lot of time as you don't have to paint every single grass strands. And there are many other brushes that you can try with gouache. Some other things you will need include a palette, two jars of water, one to add water to your paints and other one to wash your brushes. So this will help you to achieve vibrant paintings as the water you will add to your paint will be always clear. A cloth or tissue to dry your brushes on. some tape to hold down the paper, something like paper tape or masking tape as it prevents the buckling of the paper. A spray bottle to mist your paints. Make sure you are not using tape water. You should use distilled water, otherwise there are chances of drawing molds. You can also use gouache sprays. And finally, you will need an art wax to protect your paintings. I'm using Craft Angles art wax. So this will act as a layer over your painting. I use this for my gouache paintings and also watercolor paintings. So this won't be a glossy effect once it's dried, and it will also protect your paintings from water and also dust. So for checking, I'm applying few drops of water. You can see the water glides on the paper and not at all reactivating my dried paints. So that's how it works. Let's do an exercise to learn about the consistency of gouache paints. I have applied a bold black strip on the paper. I have dipped the brush with a very little moisture in the paint and painted over the strip. Even though it has a very bit of moisture, the paint doesn't spread smoothly. So this is a dry brush technique. Now add water slowly to the paints and you can see you will reach a nice creamy consistency while paint is still opaque. And when you add more water, your paint becomes transparent. And another tip is that some lighter colors are less opaque in gouache. For example, this orange color. Even though I've added very little water, we cannot achieve that opaque layering with this color. So this can be understood by swatching the paints both on white and black paper, or you can also understand this from the label on the tubes. You can see a small square on every tube. If this square is completely filled, it means that the color is opaque, and if it is partially filled, the color is less opaque. So this label is not available on Himi gouache sets. Another practice to understand the creamy consistency is filling a larger area. While painting a larger area, you might need a lot of paint. Otherwise, you will end up diluting the paint and will lose the creamy consistency. If you see brush strokes in between, it means that you haven't achieved that creamy consistency of the paint and you should use more paint in the mixture. So that's for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you do, please do like and subscribe. So I'll do a part 2 of this particular video including the blending and techniques of gouache. So please stay tuned and thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.